So in today's video, I'm going to be discussing what I think the Chiefs should do in the first round of this year's draft. Now, before we get into the video, please consider liking and subscribing, and let's jump right into the video. So with the draft only a few weeks away, I thought it would be fun to start discussing what I think the Kansas City Chiefs should do in this year's draft. Now, this video, I'm going to be talking particularly what I think the Chiefs should do in the first round. And I think right now the Chiefs have a whole bunch of different avenues that they can go in the first round of this draft, and I think they have a whole bunch of avenues that they can go throughout the entire draft. So let's just start with the first round, because that's what I'm going to be talking about specifically in this video. So in the first round, they own the 29th and 30th picks in this year's draft. So I think they have a lot of flexibility with those two picks. And they own 12 picks in this entire draft. And so they can do a lot of things with it. They can move up in the draft. They can stay where they're at. They can bundle the picks. They can do a whole bunch of different things with the draft capital they do have. Because if you look at the 12 picks and we break it down, they have 2 first-round picks. They have 2 second-round picks and 2 third-round picks. And they own the 29th, 30th, 50th, 62nd, 94th, and 103rd pick in this year's draft. So the Chiefs are loaded with draft capital in the first 3 rounds, and that's why I think the Chiefs have a whole bunch of things that they can do to help improve the team through the draft and this year. Now, and if they are going to move up in the draft, I think there's one thing in particular that the Kansas City Chiefs cannot do, and that's not bundle both of their first round picks, the 29th and 30th pick, to move up in the draft. I'm completely in favor of the Chiefs moving up in the draft this year. I think there's enough talent in this year's draft where I think the Chiefs should try to make a move. And then you look at the draft capital that the Chiefs have. I don't think the Chiefs are going to draft 12 players in this year's draft. I think that's a lot to deal with. I think that's a lot of players to bring in. I think you want to you want to improve your team the best you can. But I mean, 12 players, that's a lot of guys to bring in. So the Chiefs have a lot of draft capital that they can use to move up in this year's draft. And so if they do move up, I would love for them to keep both of their first round picks. I'm not in favor of them bundling the 29th and 30th pick to move up in this year's draft. However, if they wanted to do something like bundle the 29th pick and a second and a third round pick to move up, I'm all in favor for that, because like I said, 12 players in one draft, I don't think they're going to be drafting 12 players in this year's draft. Or if they want to, I would prefer to keep the 29th pick personally if they do move up, so they can keep the 29th pick, bundle the 30th pick, and then again like a second and a third and move up in this year's draft. Those are I'm in favor of. As long as the Chiefs still have 2 first round picks, I'm okay with them trading one of their picks to move up, not both, because I think there's too much value in those first round picks, especially with the talent this year, to bundle both of those to move up. And I would not be in favor of that. I would actually be kind of disappointed, because the holes that this team needs filled, I think it would be putting them in a very tough situation if they were to bundle those and trade up and only have 1 first round pick. I know most teams only have 1 first round pick anyways, but I think right now in this draft and what the team needs, I think the team right now is in a really good spot. But I think using both of those picks in the first round, whether it's staying at 29 and 30 or bundling them and moving up, I think the Chiefs are in a very good spot, but getting rid of both of them would be a bad idea. And like I said, I don't think they need to use all 12 draft picks on 12 individual players, but I still would like for Brett Veach and the Chiefs to keep a few of those late round picks, because I think Brett Veach has an unbelievable talent of finding guys outside of the first round. He's done it his entire career. So let's look at some of the later guys he's found. He found Trey Smith in the 6th round, found L'Jarius Sneed in the 4th round, and those 2 guys have been incredible for the Chiefs since they've been on the team. And so Brett Veach has a ability to find guys late in drafts, especially outside of the first round. And so I think the Chiefs should definitely keep some of the later picks in this year's draft, because I trust Brett Veach with the later picks, it feels like, more than the first round picks. So I think if the Chiefs do that, I think they're in a very good spot. So this brings me, what should the Chiefs do in the first round this year? And if I'm being 100% honest, I've been sold on 2 positions this entire offseason, even after everything that was going on, of what the Chiefs should do in the first round. Even when the Chiefs had Tyreek Hill, I still thought they should have went for a wide receiver in the first round. And I still stand by that, especially with Tyreek Hill gone. So there's 2 positions that I think they have to go to in the first round. Pass rusher, I think, is the number 1 priority for this team, and a wide receiver. Pass rusher, I think it's pretty obvious. Chris Jones is the only guy on that defensive line, really, that produced anything last year. Frank Clark finally restructured his contract, but he only had 4.5 sacks last year. So that defensive line needs some major reinforcement to help out every other area of that defense, because without a great, it's kind of like the offensive side of the ball. If you don't have a good offensive line, your whole offense probably isn't going to run well. It's the same with the defense. You don't have a solid defensive line, the linebackers, the secondary, they struggle. So I think that pass rusher is definitely the biggest priority in this year's draft, and that's actually a position that I think the Chiefs could use to move up and take early in the draft. I really do think that a pass rusher is their number one priority and what they need to go to first. But the one thing I'm deferring from other people that I wouldn't take in the first round is a wide receiver. Now, some people think that the Chiefs need to take a corner in the first round. Now, I completely understand why people think they need to take a corner, but if you look at the lineup right now, at least for the starting four, I think the starters for the Chiefs secondary right now are in a really good spot. So that part I'm not necessarily worried about. And again, I'm not necessarily worried about the wide receiver part either, because even after Tyreek Hill was traded, they got Juju before the Tyreek Hill trade, but then they brought in MVS and they still have McCole Hardman and they still have Kelsey as a receiving threat. The wide receiving core, I'm not particularly worried at. The secondary and wide receiver core, really, I feel like you can argue either way to go after in the first round. I really do see how people could take both sides. But for me personally, the secondary doesn't need to be an elite group. You build a good, solid defensive line, it'll be okay. The secondary right now is pretty good. Justin Reed, Juan Thornhill, Rashad Fenton, L'Jarius Sneed. I like that lineup that the Chiefs have in the secondary right now. And so when you toss it up of the two other positions that they could go after, I think wide receiver is the next position that they kind of should go for in the first round. And my reasoning behind them going for a wide receiver in the first round over a corner in that second pick in the first round slot is because this team is driven by the offense. They paid Patrick Mahomes a boatload of money. At the time was like the greatest contract ever signed in the NFL. You don't sign that guy to a contract to load up on the defense. Yes, you want the defense to be good, but you just need the defense to be sustainable. You just need the defense. You saw what the Chiefs did. They had a very average defense when they won the Super Bowl. It doesn't take an elite defense when you have Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback. And I think the Chiefs need to give Patrick Mahomes as much help as possible to help that offense succeed. Because as I said, this team is driven by the offense. And I think that it's pretty obvious by anybody that watches this team that the offense drives this team. And while the secondary is a important aspect of the Chiefs and something that you don't want a terrible and a secondary that's a liability, you also, in my opinion, when you have Patrick Mahomes making all that money, I think you have to build around him constantly. It's going to be a never-ending revolving door of trying to help Patrick Mahomes. That's the cost of signing him to a contract like this. But I think it's a risk that you have to be willing to take. And with the risk that they took signing him to that contract, I think they kind of know that, hey, every once in a while, we may have to continue drafting wide receivers in the draft to continue in helping out and giving him weapons to mess with. And I think right now, if we're comparing offense and defense, I think the secondary and I think the wide receiving core for the Chiefs are kind of on the same playing field, if you ask me. So that's why I think it's a toss-up. I really do personally think it's a toss-up. But for me personally, I think the two positions I personally, if I was Brett Veach, that would go for in the first round would be wide receiver, and definitely, undoubtedly, the number one priority, the biggest liability with this team right now is lack of pass rush. They have to go after an edge pass rusher, whatever it is, somebody that's going to get pressure on the quarterback. But those are my thoughts of what I think the Kansas City Chiefs should do in the first round. Give me your thoughts down below of what you think the Chiefs should do in the first round, and I'll see you in the next one.